Hi, I'm Mary Margaret McCamick, Master of Wine, living here in Napa Valley.
And I'm Peter Marks, also living here in Napa Valley and Master of Wine.
So we wanted to talk a bit about maybe Napa's staple, Cabernet Sauvignon. So we put together just a sampling, and hopefully there'll be more of these. We probably need to explore this category much more because there's so many wonderful examples. But I think what sort of inspired us was the idea that not all Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignons taste alike. Mm-hmm. There are many different styles, many different appellations, and although maybe Napa carries the name Napa means more to most people than, say, Rutherford or Mount Veeder, there's lots of distinguishing factors within the Napa Valley that make drinking Cabernet from this area so interesting.
Exactly. And I always like to say, if you're in New York, you hail a taxi, and if you're in Napa, you hail a cab.
Exactly. I like that joke. I've heard that one before. But
I know you have.
I'll still laugh.
Trying to lighten the mood here a little bit.
Right, exactly. So
let's tell them what the four wines are.
Okay.
So we have the Coruscant 2013 Napa Valley Cabernet,
mm-hmm.
Frog's Leap 2014 Estate, which is in Rutherford, so it's Rutherford appellated,
mm-hmm.
2012 Signorello, and their vineyards are in the
on the slopes near Stag's Leap.
I think they're Stag's Leap, sort of Oak Knoll area.
When you drive up the Silverado, you could. And you can still see where they were, but we also wanted to include Signorello for obvious reasons because I think they were
were severely affected, as you probably heard in the news, in the fire. So our heart goes out to them, and we wanted to help them by showcasing their wine, and you can still buy them and support them.
And this is the 2012 vintage, which I was very lucky to find locally, but I have a feeling that I don't think you'll be able to find it too much anymore. People are going to run out and buy it. So.
And then last but not least, the Mount Veeder 2014 Reserve from Mount Veeder appellation.
Yes.
So a nice contrast of different styles of winemaking as well as different appellations.
Absolutely. A nice swath. And I think for me, one of the things that's so interesting about Napa is as you dive in deep, we live here, so we get to taste a lot of wines all of the time. We live and work here, we work for wineries, and so we get to taste a lot more than other people do. I think that one of the things that's exciting about Napa is the potential for these AVAs in the future and the differentiating qualities. Right now, I think it would be really hard because of different winemaking philosophies and all of that to really be able to accurately every time distinguish between, Rutherford and Oakville. I mean, that would be really hard. Yeah. But we chose some producers that we thought sort of were expressive and showcased different styles in different ways that were distinguishable. So
I think the one thing maybe two things you could distinguish possibly. One would be hillside versus valley floor.
Yes.
Hillsides tend to be smaller berries, so you get more skin to juice ratio, mm-hmm. therefore you're going to get more tannins.
Really
and then
powerful.
In spite of the fact that they say every year is a great year, it is usually a great year, mm-hmm. but we also have, we've experienced quite a different certain type of climate and soil and style over the years. So like 2011, mm-hmm. very cool year. And there is a certain herbaceousness that runs through those wines.
Yes.
2013, it's got a structure and a backbone that all the winemakers are thinking it's got a great year, but it's got longevity. Mm-hmm. Followed on either side of 13, which is what we have here, are 12 and 14. And those wines are, at least from a Cabernet perspective, more supple, a little bit more manageable in the tannin structure.
Yep, absolutely. And I think for me, 14 is it's structured and very beautiful, and we can talk more about vintages as we go, but it's got so much going for it, even young.
Yeah.
Although it will age. And 13, at least for most producers, although I seem to recall Kathy at the MW panel saying that she actually felt the reverse about her 13. Mm-hmm. That'll get to her philosophy of winemaking and all of that. But 13s are typically very structured and sort of muscular. It's a muscular vintage.
Yes. Right.
And 12's kind of a mix of those in some ways. 12's very fruit forward, has longevity, but man, can it bring pleasure in the short term.
I sometimes put 12 and 13 at the end and 14 in the middle of the two, but you maybe sound like you might do a little different. So
well, no, I mean...
That's a good master wine question. Ask a master wine what they think the best vintage is, and you'll get how many different answers.
Like 35, probably. So, I guess we'll start
By the way, I just want to say, the 17 vintage, in spite of what you may have heard with heat and with the fires and such, what everyone is telling me, and I'm just not saying this, it is going to be a spectacular vintage. I know talking with Genevieve Janssens at Robert Mondavi, I mean, they picked a lot of their Cabernet before the fires, and she found ripeness at very low sugars, like 22, 22 and a half bricks. Now that's kind of what we used to do back in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
So I think it's going to be interesting to see when these, it's still early. It's too early to make any prognosis, but I think the 17 vintage, in spite of all of the ups and downs, is going to be something to cherish.
Yep. It's a vintage that really had to work for it. Yeah. So I think that
sometimes the hardest things turn out to be the best.
Exactly. It takes a long road, but
yeah.
And I think that just before we dive in, one final thing on that is the beauty of different vintages. We typically have good years in Napa. We don't have ups and downs like some parts of the world. But don't be afraid to try a vintage that doesn't necessarily get the hype of another, because everybody has their own palate. 11 I love, but it didn't get as great of reviews as 12. But man, it's restrained. It's beautiful. They're elegant wines.
Very drinkable.
Them. Yeah. So anyway, diving in. Yeah. So this is Kathy Coruscant's. It's her Napa 2013.
Correct.
And we were tasting this before and just commenting on.
It just jumps out of the glass.
Yeah.
I mean, first thing I get was that black currant. The cassis, blackberry, and yet, true to Kathy's style, there's almost like just a slight herb note.
Yep.
Not quite eucalyptus or something, but to me, I love that in my Cabernet. I don't like Cabernets that are just all fruit. I like the nuances that you can get from different parts of the world, but also Napa. We often get a little bit of that slight eucalyptus, bay leaf kind of note that makes it much more interesting, I think.
Very spicy.
Very spicy.
I love that on this nose. So, and then I feel like with Kathy's wines, you can expect them to be elegant and refined and age-worthy and just beautiful. They're
kind of like Kathy.
Yeah,
she's very elegant and refined.
True.
I have a theory that winemakers kind of look and act kind of like their wines. If they're, I know some winemakers are big and burly and they make big
but we
burly
shouldn't
wines.
name names.
And Kathy's, she's all about elegance and finesse and
absolutely
really smart. And these are just wines that thinking about them, you never understand them because there's just more that keeps coming at you as you taste it.
Yep. And it's got a very long finish, nicely structured, sort of a moderate tannin grip. It's not overly tannic,
but it does have that 13 backbone to it. It's got it really, but it's certainly well balanced in the overall sense of the fruit that's suitable to the amount of tannin there.
Yep.
And the oak is also, again, the spice a little bit in the background. And Kathy's style is obviously picking grapes less, I should say, earlier than others might. So I think the alcohol's under 14, like 13 and a half.
Right.
And as we've talked about ageability, this is a wine that I know has the capacity to go at least 20 years, if not longer.
Right.
And especially with the 13 vintage, I think this wine will hold up quite well.
And I think with time the wine will develop. I mean, Cabernet from Napa Valley ages. I mean, we've had vintages of Robert Mondavi from the 70s, and I had a 77 Diamond Creek Red Rock Terrace the other day for Peter's birthday, and it just was gorgeous. And they still have so much fruit in the core. I think that's sort of how you distinguish. For me, old Napa can sometimes be a little bit hard to get blind because it has some tertiary qualities that remind you of the old world, but they often have this really distinguished core of fruit. And the 74 Heights Martha's has that. Yeah. The Diamond Creek did, and I know as these wines age, they develop those tertiary notes and that spice, but they still have that core of ripe fruit that I love.
People say when they should drink their Napa Cabs, and my general answer is that drink them when they're young, because usually they're very showy and present well. And then for me, 10 years is kind of that. You're still getting that real youthful, bright, fresh fruit character, and yet you're starting to develop the bouquet, the bottle development. Whether it's the cedar and the spices and things. And then after that, obviously it's going to get more tertiary, meaning more bottle age character.
Right.
But they can still go 20, 30 years. But that 10-year mark for me is kind of the benchmark. It's just because you get, I think, the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I love that.
In fact, the other night I had a 2003 Cabernet from Napa, and I've had a few bottles from this one producer, and I remember a couple of years ago, it's not quite there, and now it's just like it's 11, no, it's now 14 years old, but it's just like beautiful.
And this is why you should buy several bottles of wine, right? So you can drink one when it's young and as it's aging. I think just another thing really quickly about Kathy's wines, I think a lot of people talk about pick time and hang time and all of this, and arguably she does pick earlier than other people. Yeah. But I think that we have to remember this is all in context, right? Because it depends on where your vineyard is. There's certain places that get bud burst, 3 weeks before their neighbors, and as a result, their grapes are riper sooner. Exactly. So they may be picking early, but that doesn't mean that the wine or the grapes are underripe. They just vineyards have a life of their own, and they express themselves differently.
Right. And many Napa producers now, we used to, in the last 20, 30 years, we've seen a lot of the vertical shoot positioning, and a lot of producers now are leaving a little bit more of that canopy shade, just to maybe shade things a little bit under warmer conditions to lengthen the growing season quite a bit. So depending on how you train and trellis things, it's going to obviously make a difference on your picking dates as well.
Right. And you put a bunch of winemakers together, as we have for MW panels and all of these things. I mean, we had, Dominus and Lacoya and Kathy and Genevieve from Robert Mondavi and Spotswood all in a lineup. And each of the people representing or the winemakers they all said the same thing. The wine is made in the vineyard, right? But if you taste those wines, I mean, Dominus versus Lacoya, very different styles. Right. But it's just, everybody has their own way of finding balance.
Sure.
And I think Kathy has found it in this wine.
Yeah.
I think it's lovely.
Well done.
All right.
Frog's Leap.
Okay. A classic.
Yeah. John Williams, has been one of the leading organic producers in Napa. And this is his estate bottles, so from Rutherford. And again, we've got the 14 minutes. So this, this is a beautiful young wine.
I love that smell.
Yeah. Not jammy, though, in any way.
Nope.
Again, he's another one that sort of tries to pick wines that have impeccable balance. So I think, again, we're looking at a wine with less than 14% alcohol.
And just...
There's no jamminess in the nose.
Again, very spicy. That black currant comes through.
Definitely get some cedar. For me, that's a note for Cabernet. You always get cedar with Cab.
Yep.
This, to me, tastes like a 14. It's got that, first of all, the color looks pretty youthful, but then not as much structure or tannin as Kathy's wine. I think this is if you're doing a blind tasting, you're trying to decide vintages, if you could say, these wines are within 4 years old, you could say, yeah, that's the 13, and this is probably the 14 because of the way they're built.
And yeah, absolutely, the structural aspects are a little bit different, and that could help. I think that with this wine, though, it's the texture of the tannins that also stand out. I mean, this is Rutherford, which I mean, and it could be power of suggestion and everything that's said, but I do get that kind of dusty feel. Yeah. I mean, we're tasting it open, so look, who knows if I would pick that up blind? I'd like to think I would, right. But I feel a little bit of a different texture. It's not necessarily the intensity of the tannins, but it's a textural piece.
I agree.
And I think that kind of helps people distinguishing where a wine is from, particularly with Cabernet Sauvignon. Whether it's in Napa Valley, if you're looking at the valley versus mountain, which we'll get to Mount Veeder and really firm tannins, or old world wines that tend to have a little bit more of a coarser texture in tannins.
Exactly.
But I had a 99 of this wine recently. Actually, no, it was actually just the 99 Napa Cabernet Sauvignon from Frog's Leap.
An underrated vintage.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah. So talk about wines that can age. And this was one of the first places I visited when I came to Napa. And it's such a friendly tour,
Yeah,
they're
did
very
a great job.
Wonderful people.
They really did.
So a classic. That's almost too good to put down, but we must move along, I guess.
Signorello.
All right.
So this is a 2012, the only 12 we have here in the bunch.
And I think you can, it also could be the winemaking, but on the nose, you can feel we're in a different vintage altogether.
Going a little bit up on the ripeness here.
It's richer. It's not jammy in a negative way at all. It's just riper and a little bit richer.
Yeah. It's almost like blackberry preserves. I wouldn't say jam, but kind of. It's just almost like
a compote.
A compote. Thank you. Took the words right out of my palate. Yeah, and a little bit of toasty oak too. I think this has a fair amount of oak.
Yes, I think didn't they say it's 100% new?
Oh, wow. And that's rich. That is, I think when people think of Napa Cab, that's probably their paradigm, what they go, what they think about nowadays. Again, we're seeing people are maybe dialing things back a little bit. I think that's definitely a trend, and certainly that's the style for Fargs, Leap, and Corson. But this is that, let's call it more traditional in the sense of modern traditional.
Right.
Say post 1995 or 97 when things started to sort of ramp up.
Yep.
And this is a wine that's at the same time, even though it's rich and very, very overt, I think it's extremely well balanced.
Yes.
People talk about, oh, what's the alcohol? I don't know what the alcohol is, but it feels richer. I don't feel hotness or any burn on the back. It just feels riper and deeper and overall.
I feel more alcohol. I don't know exactly what it is. I was thinking it was closer to 15. It's 15 plus.
But it's pretty well balanced.
But it's really well balanced. Yeah, there's a freshness to it amidst the ripeness, and I think that what people love about Napa wines of this style are the textural, sort of that silk, that velvety feel. Although the tannins are kind of, they are pretty grippy there, but it's just a big, bold, spicy style.
Yeah, I keep going back for another sip. I can't put it down.
I know. It's very good.
Now, one of the things that I haven't mentioned, but I think the Frog's Leap has some, and this one has Cabernet Franc. And
yes, I was
one
going to say.
of the things that's going on in Napa right now, if you look at sort of what grapes are going in, it seems to be Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot.
Yep.
Those three seem to be kind of, obviously you have Malbec and Merlot as well, but we get, Merlot can be really ripe here in Napa, and add a ripe Merlot to a ripe Cabernet almost seems incongruous.
Right.
But Cabernet Franc brings that different fruit complexity, maybe a little violet, brings acidity up a little bit, brings some freshness to the wine. And obviously Petit Verdot, I think this wine has a little of that. No, it doesn't, but I think the Frog's Leap did.
Yep.
I like my winemaker at Franciscan, Janet Myers, or Mount Veeder, she says it makes the wine stand up straight.
Yep.
Petit Verdot's got it's a dark colored, dark tannin, really adds a body and structure for longevity.
Right. And I think the Master of Wine cab tasting coming up, we're doing a panel discussion on this conversation about Cabernet Franc.
Oh, good.
And Cabernet Sauvignon, and their blending capabilities. But then you have some winemakers who are really they're triumphing Cabernet Franc on its own merits. Yep. Viator makes a wine like that. Andy Erickson at Favia. Right. And this area is great for Cabernet Franc as well. But blending, I think that's kind of an interesting thing to talk about, because I think a lot of people assume that Cabernet Sauvignon is 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, and sometimes it is, but there's a blending that, because it's like this yin and yang. It's interesting that you said Merlot and Napa and ripe Napa Cab sometimes aren't always perfect together. There needs to be another component.
Obviously, it depends on, you've got 30 miles from Caneros all the way up to Calistoga, so you can choose different appellations, and obviously they ripen and show different structure, whether it's Cab, Merlot, or any of these grapes in each of those areas.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a good thing to point out too. Unfortunately, given the reporting on the fires, I think a lot of people don't realize, that a fire in one place could be 20 miles away from other parts of Napa.
Yeah.
And so during all of this, Calistoga, unfortunately, you could, there were flames, but Napa itself the town of Napa didn't have any smoke yet. So it's a big place. We have a lot of things to work with.
Yeah.
All right, the finale, I guess.
Indeed.
All right, you can't stop drinking the Signorello.
Again, our hearts go out to the Signorello family.
Yes, but I think that rebuilding and recovering, they will.
So Mount Veeder. So Mount Veeder's on the western edge of Napa Valley. It's a part of the Mayacamas range that separates Napa from Sonoma. It's also the southernmost mountain appellation. So even though people think Napa's a warm place, in Mount Veeder, it's probably the coolest mountain appellation that you'll find. And I find the wines always have a certain elegance to them. Yep. And again, freshness, brightness. The vineyards, and again, this is one of the wines that I represent, but the vineyards for this are at elevation of 1,200 to 1,600 feet. And there's a couple different vineyards. We have 3 main vineyards up there. We still don't know how they are affected by the fires, because we can't get up there yet, unless our vineyard manager went up today. But what you find, as I said, I think with Napa Cab in Valley, you get a softness and roundness Up on the hillside, though, you have soils that are really, really meager. I mean, you might have a foot of topsoil, and then you've got rock, and there's very little water. So you have to irrigate because the water just runs down the mountain. As a result, you get vines on Mount Veeder. They're probably half the size of the vines on the valley floor. Consequently, you also get smaller berries and fewer grapes on the bunch. So everything's reduced. So you get less yield. You also get, again, more skin to juice ratio with those smaller berries, and that's where that tannin and that structure comes from.
And you can feel that. I think that you're absolutely right. And if you were trying to distinguish anything in Napa that I think you could do would be mountain fruit versus valley fruit because of that. But the wine has a really beautiful refinement. You're right. But then, man, that structure and it's fresh. And I feel like this is a wine that. It's a young wine, but it's going to age really well. I would say 10, 15. I mean, I feel like this is a wine I'd want to, with the right foods, I'd drink it now, but I'd probably put this in my cellar and wait a few years to drink it.
I just went back and tried the Coruscant because, to me, the Coruscant and the Mount Veeder are the two wines that have the most tannin. And see if I can notice any difference in the tannin. I wonder what you think. Because 13 was, again, we've talked about how it's a more structured year. 14, not so much, but we're looking at a mountain appellation.
Right.
So what do you think?
Well, to me, I feel like this could be a little bit too abstract, but I feel like it's like if you imagine tannins as little circles come together. To me, I feel like the Mount Veeder, they're very, very tight tannins, like circles very, very close together.
Yeah.
And then if you imagine those circles a little bit more spread out.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Those would be
good analogy.
Kathy's.
Yeah.
Well, does my hand help?
Yeah, that's good.
But does that, you agree?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
To me, the tannins are just a little bit more, I use that word structure a lot, but they're, to me, it's more binding to your tongue when you taste them, where the tannins and the Coruscant, they're there, but they seem to flow a little more effortlessly across the palate.
A little bit of an easier flow.
Yeah.
But the intensity
and that's that mountain fruit again.
Yep. Yeah. That's fun. It's so I don't know if people do this at home, but buying a bunch of wines from the same region and opening them with friends and talking about how they're alike and different is one of the best ways you can learn.
Right.
So,
and if there are a few people, I'll just recommend one, but Robert Craig, for example, he has Mount Veeder fruit, he has Howell Mountain Cabernet, he also produces a Napa Valley. I think he might have Spring Mountain, I'm not sure, I forget. But pick one producer that might have wines from different appellations. It's a great way to learn. Right. Because you're not looking at different winemaking styles, you're just looking at appellations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, all delicious in their own different ways and all suited for different occasions. Yeah. I think we'll probably have to explore Cabernet Sauvignon a little bit more.
I think we do, and I think our audience needs to come visit Napa because I'm afraid a lot of people have been scared away by the fires. Yep. And one of the things we want to encourage people is to come and support the wineries because once the smoke clears, it's going to be beautiful Napa Valley again. Yeah. It's always beautiful, and certainly if you have time in the next few months, come visit. Yeah. And
there's tons of businesses, restaurants that are still open, and really they, need support and love, and that's one of the, I think the best ways that you can show that is by coming and drinking and enjoying and keeping Napa, Sonoma, Mendocino, which we'll talk about more. We've focused a lot on Napa so far, but we also could have people, if people are watching and they want us to cover a certain topic, maybe they could make some suggestions.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think I'll toast with Frog Sleep.
And I'll toast with. I just picked up the Mount Veeder. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.